On this episode, I'll be introducing a strategy that could massively accelerate your path to FI. However, it might involve you stepping outside your comfort zone. But if you're listening to this, you're probably the adventurous type anyway. So stay tuned as we dive into another interesting FI strategy. You don't have to wait until you reach financial independence to start enjoying your life. You can do that much earlier and start living a life that you love and that's true to you. Welcome to Freedom Before FI. Using FIRE and life design techniques, we help you create freedom on your way to FI instead of waiting until you're retired to do the things that light you up. I'm your host Greg, a FIRE movement and life design enthusiast. If you're itching to get freedom now, then let's do this. Hello there, my friend, and welcome back to another episode. I'm excited about this topic because along with FU money and semi-retirement, this topic is definitely up there among my favorite FI strategies. As it says on the tin, I'll be talking about Geoarbitrage. One of the reasons why I like it and why you should too is because it can involve traveling, which is one of my passions, and more importantly, it can massively speed up your path to FI. So what exactly is Geoarbitrage? Well, first off, it's shorthand for geographical arbitrage, and it just means relocating to an area with a lower cost of living. You would see the biggest difference when you move from a high cost of living area to a low cost of living area. For example, someone living in Paris, San Francisco, Manila, or Sydney might decide to move to a smaller, cheaper town to lower their expenses. As we know, in the FI world, reducing our expenses is key. So Geoarbitrage can potentially reduce the big three expenses of housing, travel, and food costs. You could actually hit 3 birds with one stone. Reducing our expenses can lead to a number of benefits. Like for example, the first one is that it can help you get to your FIRE nest egg quicker, since you're able to save and invest more. Secondly, if you have Geoarbitrage as part of your retirement phase, this makes your FIRE number smaller and therefore more achievable. Lastly, if you plan to try out any alternative retirement options like mini retirements, it can help extend your mini retirement duration since your costs are lowered. Okay, so all the things I mentioned basically come under what's called GeoFIRE. It's just another FI strategy which uses Geoarbitrage at its core. And another FIRE terminology you can add to your ever-growing list. Okay, so there's 2 types of Geoarbitrage. There's domestic and international. Pretty self-explanatory what those are, but basically, domestic is relocating somewhere within your current borders, and international is going outside of your current borders to another country. Some popular destinations might include Thailand in Southeast Asia, Colombia in South America, and Portugal in Western Europe. Mainly because of their lower living costs, warmer climates, and really good amenities. So I'll be giving some examples of these 2 types, but before I do that, there's something I want to mention. There's actually a sweet spot to Geoarbitrage. Well, in my view, there's a sweet spot. And it's kind of like unlocking a bonus in a game. So the sweet spot is going somewhere with a very low living cost, but still keeping your high cost of living salary or even increasing it. For me, that's the Geoarbitrage sweet spot and something I'd recommend for you to aim at. It's like a hack to quickly increase your savings rate. Anywho, our first stop today is domestic Geoarbitrage. So let's look into that. As I mentioned, domestic Geoarbitrage is moving somewhere within your current borders, in your same country. Now, to give you an example of how this might look financially, I'll use the UK since I was born and raised there. So I'll use housing costs to paint the picture. So according to Zoopla, UK's biggest property website, the average monthly rental in London is £2,047. That's the equivalent of 150,000 pesos in Philippines or 2,600 US dollars. Now, if you look at some cities further north of UK, the average monthly rental in, say, Birmingham is £934 a month, which is about a 2.5-hour drive away from London. Nottingham is £947 a month, which is also a similar 2.5-hour drive from London. So just with those comparisons, potentially you can slash your rental costs in half by relocating a couple of hours away. And you'll still be in decent sized cities to find good jobs and transport links. Now, if we went a bit further north to, say, Liverpool, where the Beatles were originally from, you know, that boy band back in the, is it 50s or 60s? The average monthly rent there is £801, and that's about a 4-hour drive north of London. Sheffield, on the other hand, is £809, and that's a shorter distance at 3.5 hours away from London. Now, if we went to Belfast, which is in Northern Ireland and still within the UK, the average monthly rental cost is £751, compared to around £2,000 in London. You could really see the difference, and that's just based on housing costs, not including things like food, transport, and things like that. In my living situation right now, me and my wife live in a place called Imus, Cavite in the Philippines, and it's about an hour and a half south of Manila's central business district. Now, we're currently renting a 2-bed apartment, and the rental cost of this place is about the same as a tiny studio apartment in the central business district of Manila, and that's on the outskirts of the centre. And the general living costs like food and transport are a bit cheaper. Plus, there's a bit less pollution as well. There are other perks to Geoarbitrage as well. Like in the US, for example, other than lower housing costs, some states don't even have income tax, like Alaska, Florida, and Nevada. And nobody likes taxes, right? So why not move somewhere where there isn't any? Okay, so let's jump over to international Geoarbitrage. So if we continued comparing the average rental price of housing in London, UK to other places, so we said London was around £2,000. Now if we compare that to, say, Chiang Mai in Thailand, where a lot of digital nomads from all over the world relocate to, rental costs there can range roughly around £300 to £400 a month, which is a massive saving. And I'm sure you can find something even cheaper as well. Alright, so let's look at some examples. Vloggers Eamon and Christina from Our Rich Journey are a family of 4. So they moved to Lisbon, Portugal from San Francisco when they early retired. So here are some of the key reasons for their decision, starting with some of the financial benefits. So the first one is their apartment in Lisbon costs 1/4 the cost of their place in San Francisco. They're also saving money on food, healthcare, and even their kids' education. One of the biggies is that there are reduced tax benefits for foreigners. I suppose that's the reason why there's loads of US expats over there right now. Okay, so some of the non-monetary benefits were things like, of course, it has a warm climate, people are kind and friendly to foreigners, they actually made friends easily over there. English is spoken quite widely, their visa application was fairly smooth, there's good healthcare, and it's more affordable than in the US. And lastly, they said they feel safe and there's plenty to do in their downtime. So it just goes to show it's not just the money-saving benefits that make Geoarbitrage attractive. Okay, so another person I know who done international Geoarbitrage is, well, myself. Yep, I moved from cloudy grey UK to sunny and smiley Philippines in 2018. One of the best decisions of my life. The good thing for me is that being Filipino, I know the culture and I've got relatives living here too. But I do know many expats that have moved here as well. And here are some of the key benefits we've talked about. And you might hear some similarities to Eamon and Christina's reasons I said earlier. Okay, so the first one is that you can afford to live in the central business districts like Makati and BGC for a fraction of the cost compared to the business districts of, say, London and New York and things like that. Again, it has a warmer climate. Expats always say that us Filipinos are super friendly and really helpful. Again, English is widely spoken. There's obviously a massive US influence here. There are big expat communities in the main cities around Philippines. There's also so much to do, like events, malls, nightlife, traveling, camping, hiking, going to the beach, mountains. If you're adventurous like me, you can visit one of the many tropical islands, or even visit some of the neighbouring Southeast Asian countries like Taiwan, Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand. And you could get some cheap flights through airlines like Cebu Pacific and Air Asia. Anyway, that's some insight into domestic and international Geoarbitrage. Now let's look at some pros and cons to consider when thinking about geoarbitraging, if that's even a word. If we start with the pros, the first one is that it accelerates your path to FI massively. Reducing your living costs can mean an increased savings rate, especially if you move from a high cost of living to a very low cost of living area. The related benefit to that is that it can reduce your FIRE number if you decide to geoarbitrage during your retirement phase, since your FIRE number calculation is based on your expected expenses in retirement. Another pro is that it may be cheaper to purchase a house or even buy land and build on it in another country, which is what a lot of retirees from US do in the Philippines. For example, you can buy your own parcel of land and build a small but decent 2-story house in the province for like 70 to 90,000 USD. Another pro is that it can help towards alternative FI strategies, like mini retirements and semi-retirement, because it can keep you in these stages longer. For example, a sabbatical duration can be increased because of your reduced spending. Another pro is that it can potentially improve your lifestyle and health. For example, being near nature, having less pollution, more quieter surroundings, and a warmer climate. Alright, so let's move over to the cons. So the first con is that there may be less work opportunities in smaller cities or if you go overseas. Most higher paying jobs are in larger cities unless you have remote work, of course. Another con is you'll likely be away from family and friends, although that might be a pro for some people. Depending on which country, it can also be harder to get visas if you're thinking of international geoarbitrage. Another con is that depending where you go, there might be language barriers and new cultures to get used to. The last one is that moving is already difficult domestically, let alone if you plan to move internationally, with all the work required for international shipping and shipping costs and things like that. In my books, the cons mean you just need to do your homework. One of the things you can do to reduce the risks is experiment. You know we love experimenting on this show. You can experience living in different places through a holiday or a sabbatical, or even visit several places, see what it's like, speak to people, explore the area. One of the best things you can do is have informal interviews with people who've made the move if you want to learn more. Anyway, here are the key takeaways. Okay, so the first takeaway is that geoarbitrage is essentially moving to an area with a lower cost of living. If done right, it can massively accelerate your path to FI by reducing the big 3 expenses of housing, food, and transport. The second thing is that there are 2 types, domestic and international geoarbitrage. Both are pretty self-explanatory. We then discuss some domestic examples, like the difference when comparing average monthly rental costs of houses from London to other cities north of UK. You can potentially slash your housing costs in half if you move further north. For the international examples, we looked at the case study of the Irish Journey family, who moved from San Francisco to Lisbon, Portugal, to mainly have an enjoyable lifestyle. The other case study we looked at was myself, who moved from UK to Philippines. So one of the patterns we noticed that it wasn't just monetary benefits that made geoarbitrage attractive. There were also some big non-monetary benefits as well, like improved lifestyle, improved health and well-being. And then lastly, we discussed the pros and cons when considering such a move. If you think this episode would help a friend, please don't hesitate to share it with them. The show notes can be found at freedombeforefire.substack.com. If you have a question or want to connect, feel free to send me an email at freedombeforefire@proton.me. That's freedombeforefire@proton.me. If you found this show useful and want to be notified of future episodes, you can follow us on Spotify or Apple via the show's main page or on whatever app you're using right now. And lastly, if you've just learned one good thing that will help you in your journey and you want to help us out here, please do leave a 5-star rating on your podcast player app. If you're using Apple Podcasts, you can even leave a nice review by scrolling to the bottom of the podcast page. That would help us out loads. All right, so that wraps up the show today, and I really appreciate you for spending your time with me. As always, practice gratitude, live life by your design, and do things that make you smile. You got this.